everybody. Welcome back to the channel. And today I'm once again joined by Pastor Brian, and we have seen episode 1 of season 2 of Rings of Power. So we're going to be chatting about that for the next little while. And so it's been a while, though, because almost 2 years since the first season debuted. So we've been waiting for a very long time. And I kind of feel it was worth it. I have gone through the first 3 episodes since they loaded them all up on the same day. We just binged it this weekend, my husband and I. So I'm glad to see a lot of these characters again, and I'm glad to see some new characters so that people we have no idea what might happen to them because they're completely new. So yeah, looking forward to the rest of the episodes. Brian, you have any general comments before we start?
I enjoyed this. I feel I'll be honest. It's been such a long time since I watched the other ones, but I feel like it took a while for me to get going, and I felt like most episodes I enjoyed, but I had something I was annoyed with, and I have to say that other than so many scenes being pitch black and I can't tell what's going on with my eyes, at least, that's my big complaint. But as far as characters, plot, it was interesting. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Definitely want to go on to 2 and 3. I just got back from out of town, so I've got to get to those next 2. So
okay. Yeah, it did seem to keep moving, and we got a lot of scenes that really interested me. So yeah, I thought it was a pretty good start for the second season. And the dark thing that's been everywhere. Like last decade? I don't know, because at least half of episode 4 of Moon Knight, when they're under the pyramid, that's so dark you can't tell what's going on. And I'm pretty sure they did that in that last battle in Game of Thrones. It was so dark. It's like, who's fighting who? We can't tell. When they finally defeated the Night King, but who could tell because, everything was so dark. So it seems to be the thing now. Let's just record everything so dark, and then only people with home theaters will be able to tell what's actually happening. When it's like, I know that for the past several decades, you've been able to film scenes that appear to be in the dark, but it's just light enough for the action to be featured, and we can still see it. And why you're not doing that anymore? It's a complaint, Hollywood. Lighten up those scenes just enough that we can tell what is happening. Okay.
And most things I don't keep my eyes on the whole time. I'm kind of doing 2 things at a time. But this, first of all, this is always so visually beautiful, right? Mm-hmm. I'm prepared to watch it. I don't do anything else while I'm watching this. Plus, it's just a little more interesting than most. I usually have something going in the background. But so I don't maybe notice it in other things, but I sure notice it in this for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it is beautiful. Once again, the costumes were just gorgeous. It's like, I don't know what it took to make all those costumes, but they're just so beautiful. A lot of that $1 billion they get, it's right there on the screen. Those sets are huge. It's just gorgeous. So for episode 1, though, we start off with, I actually liked it, but I like background information, and some people don't. But here we get the whole story of how Sauron became Halbarad. Yeah, I keep saying that. Poor Halbarad, the character, who is great in Lord of the Rings, but this is Halbrand. How Sauron becomes Halbrand. And I think that was really cool. That's not what happens to Sauron in Calibeth, but that, okay, that's fine. This is an interesting way to see how he's been spending his second age. So he goes to Forodwaith, and he's telling the orcs, I'm your only future, and you have to follow me, and even up and murders one of them for some unknown reason, I guess. And then they all turn on him. Adar's like, nope, we're going to be free. He stabs Sauron, and everybody else stabs Sauron. So we can see why last season Adar said Sauron is dead, right? Because now we know that Sauron can't really die because he is one of those lesser angels like Gandalf and Saruman and the Balrogs. They're all these Maiar. So he can't really die any more than Gandalf really died when the Balrog killed him. But he can be terribly inconvenienced, which he is. But perhaps Adar just doesn't quite realize that he can't quite die, so he thinks he's dead, and we can see why he thinks he's dead. So we can buy that, I guess. But then I do like the fact that he basically hangs out underground for 1,500 years or something, just trying to.
I got major Voldemort vibes when I was totally watching that. Yeah, totally.
I think in one of those really dark scenes, he even consumes a rat. We see the little teeth disappearing into this oil sludge, right? So he's going around. He's absorbing some energy, trying to form himself. He manages to escape, right? He's this sort of sludgy thing, but he then takes over someone's body. body or something. And so, we're getting this, and he does that apparently shortly before he meets Galadriel, right? So he hasn't been Halbrand that long. But he's been spent this whole time she's been searching the second age. She's going all over Middle Earth trying to find Sauron. That was the very first scene of the very first episode, right? Season 1. So climbing that ice cliff and getting to Forodwaith and searching the whole place and trying to find Sauron. Well, it turns out he's been underground as a pile of sludge for most of that. So, but now has a form again. And as anybody who knows who's read, the Akallabeth, Sauron can appear pretty at
he sure is
a fair form.
Very, very good looking man.
Until the end of the second age. When the third age begins, he loses that ability to appear fair. He can only appear foul. But he still has that ability now. So, he can look nice, he can act nice, he's really quite clever and how he is managing to, get people to trust him. He gets Galadriel to trust him, So here these people invite him on their ship to try to go find some foreign lands to, colonize, and he goes along and seems to be like making friends and all that, but really it's still Sauron, but he's playing it well. And the actor's doing a good job of giving that whole, he might, he's playing at this, and maybe once in a while he's kind of thinking, could I turn good? And the Akallabeth, as we are told that Sauron tries. He doesn't make it, but he's so afraid of the Valar when they defeat his boss Morgoth that he's just like terrified into trying to behave well. It just doesn't last. So
in the last episode of season 1, when he's trying to convince Galadriel to be with him, I mean, I'm a sucker for a pretty face. I probably would have been. He would have had me. But I like this exposition because they're showing us, not telling us. They did a lot last year of like inferring, kind of like, ooh, and you kind of had to figure it out, and then they did a lot of telling us. Whereas I felt like this was just, they're telling a story, but it's the exposition, and I liked that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and when he was trying to convince Galadriel, he did the, we can rule it together, and she's like, or we can save the world, or she's, what do you mean rule it or save it? And he's like, I don't see the difference, right? So we've got some character defects there, right?
A little bit.
So, but we can see him kind of struggling with them too when he's talking to people. It's like he doesn't quite know, could I be good? Could I turn good? Am I always evil? He seems to be sometimes not quite sure, which is, great for the character because, one-dimensional characters are not very interesting. So the fact that we start almost like 20 minutes in before we even get away from the Sauron story was fine with me because I was very interested in what he'd been doing for the entire second age. And now we know.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I even liked, I don't always love illusions. Sometimes they take me out of it. But like I said, I was definitely getting Voldemort vibes. But then it was hysterical when he rode up on that wagon wheel. I totally felt like it was like The Blob, which was one of my favorite, horror fictions when I was a kid. It was like The Blob like came up and then it got that lady, I think, driving it. Yeah. That was hysterical to me. I loved that. That was cool. It was all there. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Like, it's either The Blob or he's the Thing or he's something like that, right? Nation body statures. Yeah. So then we have...
Now they just need to get the creature from the Black Lagoon and I'll be happy.
There you go. But then we have Elrond and Galadriel fighting over these rings. Once again, horses are being used as like cars. Like the horses never get tired. They're just like apparently galloping all the way from Lindon to Eregion. And I don't think that's terribly close because, the High King sends a message. It never gets to Lindon. So it's like... which I think is one of the more unbelievable things we'll see by the time episode 3 happens. You're like, there's been no traffic between Eregion and Lindon in all this time. There's not traders going back and forth. There aren't people visiting their families. There aren't soldiers getting reassigned to duties. There's not messengers carrying other things back and forth. Nobody has, it is just like, really? They see these like act like they don't even know each other exists until it's convenient. And here it just seems like, Eregion is so closed off from the rest of Elf world that they just have no idea what's going on. They don't even know that this tree has come back to life or anything. But first we see them, Elrond wants to destroy the rings. Galadriel, I guess, wants to use them. The High King wants to at least see them. And, we have this sort of interesting, Elrond, who's now decided that if Sauron ever got near the rings, right, it's bad news. Now, of course, in the Calibeth, when he learned that he had nothing to do with those rings being forged, and so they were the three rings that escaped him. And when he put on the one ring, the three wearers of the elven rings were able to perceive his thoughts and immediately remove their rings because they knew that he would be able to perceive theirs in return. But he couldn't affect what they did with those rings. Like, they used them in secret in the third. So Elrond's using Vilya to maintain Rivendell, and Galadriel's using Nenya to maintain Lothlorien, and Gandalf is using Narya to kind of help bolster people's spirits and make people feel good about themselves and hopeful, spreading hope. So they're using them kind of on the sly during the Third Age, whereas the other rings really can't even be used without Sauron taking control of you. Well, if you're a person, the dwarves apparently proved a little bit difficult to control. He still tries, but dwarves are made of sterner stuff than people apparently, and we're able to resist him to some extent. So, anyway, so Elrond doesn't want the rings to be worn or even looked at, so he jumps off a cliff, right? Very dramatic. And heads out to see Círdan the shipwright, who I was like fascinated with. It's like, yay, we finally get Círdan in a story, and he's even like canon because he's one of the few elves, it says there in the text, that's old enough to have managed to grow a beard. And this Círdan has a beard, he's a bearded elf, which is like really, really unusual. But Círdan is exceptionally ancient. So I thought that was really cool that they put that detail in there.
Yeah. Still very vital and vigorous though. Like that, he had great presence and energy. Like those scenes were pretty cool. They had like the least happening, but that was a good scene, like right there. That was good.
Yeah, I liked his character. I like that we got to see him. Apparently, sometime later in the season, we're going to see Tom Bombadil too, or maybe even the Blue Wizard. So, so they're putting in some characters that haven't made it on screen in previous incarnations of this. So that could be interesting. But here we get to see Círdan, which is really cool. But then I thought what was almost cooler was that when we go back to see Galadriel and Gil-galad, and Gil-galad's like, well, we can't let him escape or whatever, and Galadriel says, well, he's not looking to escape. And they're such good friends that she knows what he's going to do. She's like, he's going to go talk to someone older and wiser, really much older and much wiser. And there's like only one elf then that could even mean. So she just goes straight to Círdan. And it's like, well, she just knew, okay, if I go to Círdan, I'll find Elrond. And they did.
And as somebody, like, I only read the three, Lord of the Rings books, that, and then watched the three movies. So of course, Galadriel and Elrond, like I kind of know how I want them to be. And I felt much more of that. Not that they're totally there yet, but I felt they just seem to have better self-awareness and better character in this one episode. So I'm hopeful that this season they'll really kind of more bloom into like kind of superstars, like I know them as, right? Like,
Yeah, and I thought we got a little less of the like sexual tension too, which was fine because in the first season I kept thinking, she's your mother-in-law, But since this, we haven't seen her husband and child. Well, she just mentioned him in that last season, briefly, so we know they exist somewhere. He
was kind of jealous though, the way he kind of bit her about how she was so easy to accept Halbrand, he snapped at her a little bit.
Yeah, but Sauron's really good though at that, getting people to trust him. When he can appear nice, he basically takes all of Numenor in the Calibeth, right? He lets them think that they've captured him against his will, and they're dragging him to Numenor, but that's exactly where he wants to go. And so when he gets to Numenor, he manages to start speaking in the ears of the people in power, and they start bringing back things like child sacrifice and all these evil things that their ancestors did at one point, and so he gets what he wants when he looks pretty and he's able to convince people. And so we're going to see him then obviously work on Celebrimbor, since at the very end of the episode we see him ride on up to Eregion. Well, then finally we go to the Nori and the Stranger, and going to Rune, which we've never been on screen before either. So that should be exciting as well. When you see it on those maps, that big lake east of Mordor, which just says Rune. So they get trapped in this like weird dimension where you always end up back where you start, and but then they get Poppy and she's got the little trail book, and she knows the secret. If you know the walking song and it's not just nonsense, so you can follow the directions in the walking song to get yourself out of Rune. So convenient, but actually kind of cool too that, the Harfoots have been traveling around long enough that they know how to get out of these kind of weird geographical traps and stuff. So that was kind of cool.
That reminded me a little bit there of Scooby-Doo or Johnny Quest or something, It's like, wait, we've been walking and we're back at the same place. That was awesome.
We just sing the walking song. We'll get out of here. And they do.
Yeah, Poppy of all people to help.
and I guess kind of we're talking a little bit. We get a little bit of like Hobbit appetite, right? Because Nori really wants some food, and she convinces the stranger to try. He's kind of reluctant, and he makes a bunch of like wood lice or something, and she's so excited. We'll eat for days, and then she's chomping on them, and then he eats one. He's like, well, you can feel the legs, and she's like, oh, that's the best part. You're like, oh my god, Hobbits.
They're dancing. She said they're dancing in your throat. Yeah, I thought that was funny because it's a great contrast to what's going on when we saw the whole Sauron reconstituting himself, and so I'm thinking, oh, well, he thought this was gross probably, but there, if he was a Harfoot, that would have been some delicacies he was eating back then.
Yeah, so obviously hobbits have a good appetite for bugs and not just snails. She's like, oh, we ran out of snails days ago, so it's like, oh, okay. But now they have bugs to eat, and she's happy. So that's cool. And then Poppy has brought like bread and stuff, so they even get
biscuits. Yeah.
So we get kind of caught up on what's happening with Nori, what's happening with Elrond and Galadriel, and what's happening with Sauron, at least to the point where he does something I don't understand. And maybe if anybody just actually watches this, that we have very few views, but if you watch this, let us know in the comments why you think Sauron turned himself into Adar. He gives a story about how, I'm still the king of the Southlands, and I want you to let my people go, and I know stuff from the elves that you don't know yet. I could give you information, and blah, blah, blah. But it just doesn't feel like it's making much sense that he gets himself captured. Was it just to befriend a warg? Was it just to find out what Adar's doing right now? I mean, you'd think he'd have other ways to figure that out, but I don't know.
Just to kind of taunt Adar in his own mind, even though Adar doesn't know.
It's unclear to me why. Yeah. I understand why he goes to Rhiannon, right? He wants to get back to Celebrimbor and make some more rings. But I don't understand why he got himself captured and what he's doing there, waiting for days while he gets beaten and starved and everything. What is he waiting around for? What is his plan? Just to tell Adar, well, I could, the elves will let me into their city. Okay. I mean, it's like, you're really offering that much to Adar? I don't see it.
Yeah. But at first, when I was watching it, I thought, oh, well, maybe he's going to use this as a way to go to the elves. But he can't go to the elves anymore. He already blew that cover. Yeah, right. So he can't. Well,
not in Linden. He can't. He blew his cover there with Galadriel. He's obviously trying to go to Rhiannon, was still looking like Halbrand. So he will have to change later. But he is a master shapeshifter. But he's also, if you've read the Silmarillion, he's also had the title Lord of Werewolves. And so and werewolves in Tolkien do not turn into people. They are just like big bad wolves. So various kinds of evil canids, including the wargs. And we see a warg here, and Sauron befriends it by throwing it a bone and then like talking to it in the black speech. And somehow then that means that when he gets released from the camp, he is able to, tell the warg, go kill that guy, right? I want him dead. Because the warg goes right to that dude's little hut and kills him. So, and then we don't see it again. So I don't know if it escapes or it goes back to its dungeon or what, but it's obviously.
But you heard that guy screaming. He screamed for like 3 seconds, yeah.
But clearly it's on Sauron's side now. He does have at least one ally on Adar's camp, and it's a warg. So.
Yeah.
So I guess that's kind of cool that he, is using those old powers and old abilities to somehow communicate with the evil kinds of dogs, dog-like things, to make them his subjects. And so, that was I did like that he was able to get this work the way he wanted. And I also thought it was rather clever because he is rather clever. When Adar wants his allegiance, right? He says, "You swear allegiance to me." He says, "Yes." And then we're like, "Okay, so make a vow," right? And so now we get more serious about making it an actual vow and not just saying sure. But what does he actually promise? He doesn't promise to be faithful to Adar. He says he's going to serve the Lord of Mordor. Clearly, he considers himself the Lord of Mordor.
Yes.
So he is not offering any allegiance to Adar, despite the fact this is the vow. And Adar doesn't get it, okay, that he has managed to outsmart him in this thing because Adar's just like, okay, cool, I must be the Lord of Mordor, so it's fine, right? But
Adar seems dumb in that situation because it was pretty clear he was not doing what Adar wanted him to do. But
yeah, so
poetic license there, I guess.
Yeah, I guess maybe he thought if he's still buying that he's the Lord of the Southlands, then maybe he doesn't really get it. But yeah, so Sauron's definitely made a vow, but only to be faithful to his own self, which he already was. So that's worked out for him. And I thought it was a nice little detail.
To the end of his life and to the end of Adar's, that was a nice little dig there too. I like that.
To the end of my days, or something like that, right?
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. And to yours, or something they said, or something like that, or and to his, or mine, or something like that.
And Adar, as we've suggested, since he's an elf, or was originally an elf, right? He says he's one of 13 that was chosen to be experimented on. So he's like one of the original elves that was worked on by Morgoth way back in the before times, before there was anything with the stars, before there was a sun or moon or anything. Which, as we mentioned a few episodes ago, probably makes him the oldest thing in the show that wasn't immortal, like from the beginning of time with God. But so like one of the oldest elves, because even Galadriel's her grandparents, who were from that generation that was just created out of ex nihilo, she's got parents and grandparents. But Adar, he's one of those first elves. He was just created. He didn't have parents, so he's very well one of our oldest characters here, even maybe older than Círdan. So that's
wow.
cool.
I didn't think about that. Yeah.
So
yeah, that's cool.
So him saying, to the end of my days and yours. I mean, Adar has already made it through however many hundreds of thousands or millions of years, and he could continue to live forever just like Sauron could. So, so it's kind of an interesting oath. But then we get to like the big reveal where Círdan's decided not to destroy the rings or throw them in the sea, making them impossible to retrieve. He brings them to Lindon and drops them. Okay, he drops them or Gil-galad drops them. Somebody drops them, right? And one of them lands.
Gil-galad did, yeah.
One of them lands right at Galadriel's feet, and one of them lands in front of Gil-galad, and then Círdan's already put one on. So these are our 3 original elves who are going to wear those rings. I mean, eventually the one that Círdan has on, he will give to Gandalf, and the one that Gil-galad has on, he will give to Elrond, so that when we actually have the Lord of the Rings happening, it's going to be Elrond and Gandalf and Galadriel who have those rings. But here they are their original owners, and then we sort of get this tension where apparently the showrunners want to think that these 3 rings are like the One Ring, that they are corrupt and they will turn you evil. So we get these scenes of like all our elf characters who are wearing them, kind of looking like they're glassy
precious.
That suddenly they're kind of been taken over or something. Although Sauron doesn't have any of the rings yet, so clearly he can't be affecting them right now. He doesn't even have the One Ring. So, I assume that the One Ring's forging will end up being, if they get the whole 5 seasons that they've been planning. So we'll have to find out. But so here we still have the 3 rings, and now people are wearing them, and Elrond's all upset about it, but they're not. And the tree comes back to life, and the elves don't have to leave Middle Earth. But that whole subplot that I didn't understand is now, I guess,
that's right.
Finished.
That's right.
The elves don't have
the little
to go.
song kind of tried to explain it, but it still seems an artificial plot point to me. Yeah.
And we've dusted it. It's gone. Right. The tree's back, so that's all cool. And so then that pretty much ends the episode.
Yeah.
So we don't get anything with the dwarves this time, and we didn't really get to Numenor. So we did manage to. They didn't try to cram everybody into episode 1, which is probably a good thing. But we really established a lot of Sauron scenes, right? First we get the whole backstory how he becomes Halbrand. Then we get him in the Southlands and turn himself into Adar, and we get these scenes in the orc camp. And then there's the final scene of him showing up to Eregion, to Celebrimbor's gate. So really, it's a Sauron episode. And then we get
as it should be.
Elves, a little bit of the elves, and a little bit of the Harfoots there, but mostly Sauron.
Yeah, and I know you know episode 2 and 3, so I will catch up on them soon. But I'm very interested. I'm very excited. I'm much more excited than I was after season 1, episode 1. I have to say.
Yeah. It's been very interesting. This one just did keep. We did say last season they did seem to plot a lot. This one didn't plot. The episode 1 did just keep moving, and even when they were doing the backstory of Sauron, it didn't really stop. It just kept going, and so we're getting all these kind of jump cuts to 1,000 years later. Not that we're putting it on the screen or anything, but you're just getting this over time. What's going on with Sauron? And I don't know how much they really condensed, because the stuff between Sauron starting to forge the rings and stuff and trying to get to Numenor, and the stuff at the end where we had the last alliance of men and elves, that's 1,500 years. And they're going to condense that here to 5 seasons. And obviously in just one human lifetime, because Isildur is going to end up being, and Elendil will end up being kings in Middle Earth. So they can't get too much older. So we're condensing 1,500 years of a decade or less. So I have no idea how many years it's supposed to have been since the Second Age started, but we just have kind of rushing through. Yeah, we enjoyed it. So
not many humans. This was not a human episode, so it'll be interesting.
Or dwarves, but we will catch up with the dwarves.
Or dwarves, okay.
Yeah, and I like the dwarves. I just love Disa. I think she's one of my favorite characters.
Same. I was thinking the same thing. She's great.
Yeah. So we'll get to catch up with Disa a little bit. I think maybe in episode 2, but certainly by episode 3 we'll have several dwarf scenes and see what's going on in Khazad-dûm. Now that the king and the prince aren't talking to each other, and the prince is officially disinherited because he claimed that he liked Elrond as a brother, and his father's you're basically bad mouthing your mom. Your mom never would have given birth to an elf, right, or something. So they're not speaking. They've woken up a Balrog and don't know it yet. So bad things are happening in Khazad-dûm, and so we'll have to see how the dwarves are going to start trying to deal with that. And we'll get some people back in there, because obviously at the end of last season we got back to Numenor just in time to see the black flags flying, because the king had died while they were gone. Yeah, so his daughter, who is now blind, is she going to manage to be the next ruler of Numenor? But she's got that sneaky, counselor who looks like he is aiming for the throne. So we don't know what's going to happen there. We know what happened in Ykalabeth, but we don't know what's going to happen on our show here. Remember to hit like and subscribe, or I guess you could hit the down thumb too. I mean, I think that YouTube cares one way or the other. It just counts as engagement, so that's good for me. And,
for the sake of engagement, that's right.
That's right. And let us know what you think in the comments, and we'll see you next time on our next episode.